The night before the summer didn't feel like a night at all. There was no moon. No stars. Only a black sky pressing down like a lid, sealing every sound, every breath, every thought. When the order came, it came softly, almost whispered, as if the officers were afraid the darkness itself might overhear. Wire parties. Forward. Corporal Henry Nash tightened his chin strap and looked at the 4 men crouched around him. Their faces were pale shapes in the gloom, smeared with mud and ash to kill the shine of sweat. None of them spoke. They all knew where they were going. No man's land. Where patrols vanished like smoke. Where bodies lay half swallowed by mud. Where German flares could turn pitch black into blazing noon in a heartbeat. Nash moved first, sliding over the parapet. The others followed, one by one, sinking into mud thick enough to swallow boots whole. The rules were simple. Crawl low. Don't silhouette yourself against the sky. Cut quietly. If a flare goes up, freeze. And above all, if they see you, you will not make it back. Arthur Bell, the youngest of the party, breathed through his nose to stay silent. His heart hammered so loudly he was terrified the Germans might hear it. He carried nothing but a pair of wire cutters wrapped in cloth to deaden the sound. They crawled past craters that stank of cordite and corpses. Past shattered helmets embedded in mud. Past a half-rotted hand curled around a rusted rifle. Arthur forced himself not to look long. Tonight wasn't about looking. It was about surviving 2 hours in the deadliest stretch of earth in Europe. Lightning flickered far away, no, not lightning. Artillery flashes, distant but constant. The entire horizon pulsed like a dying heartbeat. Corporal Nash raised his hand sharply. Stop. The men pressed themselves into the mud. No one moved. No one breathed. A German flare hissed into the sky, then burst open like a white star. The entire battlefield lit up, brilliant, ghostly, merciless. The wire party froze, faces pressed into the dirt, fully exposed. Arthur's mind screamed, don't blink. Don't twitch. Don't even think. The light drifted, hovered, then slowly burned out, leaving them blind again in the instant switch to darkness. Nash waited 10 full seconds. Then 20 more. Only when he was sure the Germans weren't firing did he crawl forward again. A few meters ahead, the first line of German barbed wire revealed itself, a faint glint of metal in the dark. Thick, tangled, taller than a man, stretching for hundreds of yards. It was no simple fence. It was a weapon. A trap designed to hold attackers in place while machine guns chewed them apart. Arthur swallowed hard. Henry Nash motioned silently. Begin. The men spread out, each selecting a section of wire. They worked by feel, not sight. Hands trembling. Every movement deliberate. Arthur found a strand tight as a violin string. He slid the wrapped cutters around it, gripping as gently as if holding a bird. He squeezed. Snap. Not loud. But louder than he wished. He froze. All of them froze. Nothing. No shots. No shout in German. He exhaled shakily and kept cutting. One wire at a time. One breath at a time. Behind them, English guns waited. Behind them, 120,000 soldiers waited for paths through this metal forest. And it was up to 5 men in the dark to carve them. They worked for 20 minutes. Then 30. Their sleeves were torn. Their knuckles bled from sharp edges. Their knees were soaked and freezing. Still, they worked in silence. Until, from the left flank, someone whispered hoarsely, Nash. Henry turned. Private Lionel Bird was staring ahead with wide, horrified eyes. Not at the wire. Not at the Germans. At the ground. Where a rusted metal tripwire ran beneath the mud. A line connected to something buried. Arthur's breath hitched. German flare mines. If they touched one, even brushed it, every machine gun on the ridge would open fire. Corporal Nash swallowed. Stay still, he whispered. No sudden movements. But Private Hodge, moving just a bit too fast, didn't see the thin wire stretched tight across his path. His sleeve brushed it. A metallic ting echoed into the night. Arthur's heart stopped. Nash's eyes widened. And then, From the German lines came the sound they all feared. A machine gun bolt sliding back. For one suspended heartbeat, the night held its breath. No one moved. No one spoke. Even the distant artillery seemed to fall silent. Then, a single German machine gun coughed. Not a burst. Not a spray. Just a test, a warning, as if the gunner wasn't sure he'd heard something. Corporal Henry Nash clenched his jaw. If the Germans fired properly, the wire-cutting party wouldn't stand a chance. They were exposed, lying in tangled metal, too far from the trenches to run and too close to the enemy to hide. Nash whispered, barely audible. "Don't move." Arthur Bell pressed his cheek into the freezing mud. His fingers had tightened so hard around the wire cutters that his knuckles whitened in the dark. His breath trembled against the ground. Private Hodge, the man who had brushed the tripwire, was silent. Frozen. Every muscle in his body tight as cable. They waited. 1 second. 3 seconds. 5. Then, whoomph. Another German flare shot into the sky, arcing overhead like a white comet. "Don't you dare move," Nash breathed. The flare blossomed open. And no man's land turned to daylight. Caught in the open. The wire-cutting party lay inches from the first gap they had carved. If the Germans spotted even one of them, the entire patrol would be lost. Arthur's heart hammered so loud he was certain it echoed across the battlefield. Through the harsh light, he saw the German parapet clearly for the first time, dozens of helmets lined up along the crest, like silhouettes carved from iron. Machine guns perched like metal beasts. Rifles aimed outward into the light-washed expanse. If one soldier shouted, if one finger tightened, they were finished. Henry Nash did not blink. Arthur Bell did not breathe. Private Bird's lips trembled in silent prayer. Hodge's eyes were wide with terror. The flare drifted down slowly, slowly, casting every shadow with merciless clarity. A machine gunner shifted. Arthur felt his stomach drop as the barrel angled. Closer? Closer? Toward them. Then, the flare died. Darkness slammed back down like a curtain. "We move now." Corporal Nash hissed the words and immediately resumed crawling. Every second spent in this area doubled their chances of being seen. Arthur's entire body shook, but he followed. The men worked again with frantic precision, clipping wire, folding it down, opening a narrow tunnel through steel and spikes. Their hands bled freely now, mixing with the wet soil. They were nearly halfway through the wire when Lionel Bird froze again. "Henry," he whispered. "Something's wrong." Nash crawled over. "What is it?" Bird tilted his head. Arthur stopped too. Because he heard it. A new sound. Soft. Rhythmic. Mechanical. Clink, clink, clink. Not from the German trenches. From the right. Nash hissed. "Someone else is out here. Another patrol." Arthur's blood turned cold. They were not the only ones on no man's land tonight. A shadow moved, very low, very slow, about 20 yards to their right. Too small for a full squad. Too deliberate to be an animal. Another pair of cutters clicked faintly. "Is that our boys?" Hodge whispered. But Nash shook his head. "They're too far forward. That's not British." "Then who?" A voice whispered in German. Arthur's mouth went dry. A German wire patrol. Out here. At the same time. Working their own section of wire. Neither side knew the other was there. If even one German turned his head. Nash pointed down, signaling. "Stay absolutely still. Do not cut. Do not move." The night grew painfully quiet. Arthur could hear his own blood rushing past his ears. The German voices drew closer, not speaking loudly, just exchanging murmured words as they clipped a section of their own forward barrier. The two patrols were now separated only by darkness, tension, and 20 feet of killing ground. Arthur shut his eyes. "Please. Don't look this way. Please." A German soldier hummed softly, some tune Arthur didn't recognize. The sound drifted over the wire like a ghost. Then the clinking grew softer. Then softer still. Then silence. Nash waited a full minute. then whispered, "They're gone. Move." Quietly. The final wire. They reached the last section. This was the thickest barrier, twice as dense, weighted down, reinforced with stakes angled toward the British lines. This was the one designed to break the attack. Nash signaled each man. Bell on the left. Hodge center. Bird with him. Private Mullen on the right. Arthur gripped his cutters and exhaled slowly. Every clip felt like a thunderclap. Every shift of mud felt like a shout. And the night was nearly over. A faint grey glow touched the sky. Corporal Nash saw it. Arthur saw it. All of them knew the truth. They were running out of time. Nash whispered, "Urgent. Cut faster. Quiet but faster." They worked in a frenzy. Clip. Pull. Fold down. Crawl. Next section. Clip. Pull. Fold down. Crawl. Then Arthur felt something seize the back of his coat. A hand. Cold. Human. He jerked his head back in terror. And staring at him through the darkness. Face smeared with mud. Helmet cracked. Eyes wide. Was a German soldier. Alive. Breathing. Kneeling in the wire. And he had Arthur by the collar. Arthur Bell stared into the eyes of the man gripping his coat. Mud. Blood. Shock. The German soldier looked as terrified as he was. No words. No shouts. No call for help. Just that silent, desperate grip. Arthur's heart pounded like artillery in his chest. Corporal Nash froze, cutters poised mid-air. Hodge swallowed hard, barely containing a gasp. Bird's hand drifted slowly toward his bayonet. But the German didn't raise a weapon. Didn't cry out. Didn't lunge. He simply whispered, barely more than breath. "Bitte, nicht. Please, don't." Arthur's body slackened. The man wasn't attacking. He wasn't defending. He was begging. Another flare fired into the sky. Light exploded overhead. The German released Arthur instantly, throwing both hands up to shield his face. His helmet slipped, exposing pale hair matted with grime. In the harsh white glow, Arthur finally saw the truth. The soldier was tangled, deeply, painfully. Caught in the barbed wire itself. His coat was shredded. His arms were lacerated. One thigh was twisted around a strand so tightly it had cut into the skin. He hadn't grabbed Arthur to attack him. He'd grabbed him. Because he needed help. The men decide. Corporal Nash hissed. "Move back. Quietly. Now." Arthur didn't move. The German soldier looked at him, trembling, eyes full of fear, and not of Arthur, but of what would happen when the next flare lit the field again. Arthur whispered. "He's stuck. Henry, he's stuck." Nash growled softly. "I can see that. Leave him. He's the enemy." Arthur looked into the man's eyes again. There was no threat. No hatred. Only pain. Only a human being who did not want to die alone in the wire. Hodge whispered. "He'll scream if we try to cut him free." Bird shook his head. "He'll scream louder if we don't." Another flare launched. Time was almost up. The sky was turning from black to bruised blue. The artillery would fire soon. The barrage would begin. And anything, anyone, in no man's land would be erased. Arthur took a breath. "We don't leave him." Nash locked eyes with him. "This isn't your decision." Arthur whispered. "It's the right one." The German soldier winced in pain as another strand tightened around his leg. And then, he whispered again. "Bitte, helfen. Please, help. The rescue." Corporal Nash exhaled sharply. "Fine. We're doing this my way. Hodge, watch the German lines. Bird, help Bell with the cutters. Mullen, if he makes a sound, you stop him. Understand?" Every man nodded. Nash crouched in front of the wounded soldier, speaking softly. "Quiet. No shouting. No noise, or you die. Understand?" The soldier nodded vigorously. Arthur and Bird worked fast. Clip. Clip. Pull the wire back. Lift it gently off torn fabric. The German clenched his jaw and breathed in sharp, controlled bursts. His whole body shook. Blood dripped quietly onto the mud. Another flare illuminated them. Nash froze. Arthur froze. Everyone froze. Machine gun silhouettes sharpened across the field. But no bullets came. The flare died again. Arthur whispered. One more lock in his leg. Bird nodded and held the wire apart while Arthur slid it free. The German gasped, biting down on his sleeve to keep from crying out. Then it was done. The soldier sagged forward, barely conscious. Nash whispered. He can't walk. We can't carry him. Bell, what's your plan now? Arthur didn't know. He looked toward the British lines. Then the German ones. Both sides would fire soon. Arthur looked at the soldier. A boy. No older than 19. Terrified. Starving. Injured. Alone. Arthur whispered. He came from there. He pointed toward the German trenches. We put him back over the wire on his side. If we can get him that far. Nash's jaw flexed. You understand that if they see us? I know. The German grabbed Arthur's sleeve weakly. Dank, dank. Arthur shook his head. Save it. Just stay quiet. The crawl home. They half lifted, half dragged the wounded soldier toward the German line, keeping low, every movement painfully slow. The Germans were changing shifts on the parapet, moving back and forth, silhouettes crossing like ghosts. A machine gunner scratched his chin and looked outward. Arthur's breath froze. If the gunner leaned forward another inch, he would see them, 5 British soldiers carrying one of his own. But he didn't. He simply lit a cigarette and looked away. They reached a break in the German wire, almost identical to the one the British were cutting. Bird whispered. They were prepping for a raid. That's why their patrol was out here. Nash nodded grimly. Let's hope they can't see in the dark as well as we can. Together, they eased the German boy through the opening and pushed him toward the shadow of a crater nearer the German lines. He whispered one last word. Mutter? Then he crawled away on his stomach, disappearing into darkness. Arthur let out a shuddering breath. Hodge whispered. Think he'll make it? Arthur answered honestly. I don't know. But he's got a chance. Nash touched Arthur's shoulder. Now move. Fast. We've overstayed. The guns awaken. They scrambled back to their own wire, moving faster now, less careful, driven by the rising hint of dawn. A faint breeze rolled over no man's land. The sky lightened. The bird stirred. Distant guns began to click into position. They reached the last section of British wire when... boom! A British howitzer thundered somewhere behind them. The barrage had begun. Nash yelled. Down! Shells shrieked overhead like banshees. Explosions ripped open the ground. The earth shook as the opening bombardment lit up the German line. Arthur covered his head as mud rained down. The German trenches erupted in fire and chaos. Screams echoed across the battlefield. The men lay pinned to the ground, helpless in the open. Arthur's mind flashed with terror. The young German. Still crawling. Still bleeding. Heading back to a trench that was now being pulverized. God, Arthur whispered. What have we done? Nash grabbed him. Survive this barrage. That's your job now. Back inside the British trench. They dove into the British front line as more shells soared overhead. A sergeant grabbed Nash. You got it done? The wire. Nash nodded. By a miracle. The sergeant shouted. Then God help the Germans. The attack starts in 10 minutes. Arthur leaned against the trench wall, shaking. His hands were cut. His knuckles were bleeding. His heart still hammering. Bird handed him a canteen. You did the right thing, Art. Arthur stared at the German line, now lost in flame and smoke. Did I? Behind him, the British infantry began to assemble. Fixing bayonets. Checking rifles. Saying prayers. The battle for the sector was about to begin. Arthur Bell stood among them. But his mind was still out in no man's land. With the boy he had saved. Or condemned. The sky was no longer night, but not yet day. A grey, bruised twilight hung over the battlefield like a dying breath. Arthur Bell tightened his helmet strap with shaking fingers. Every man in the trench knew what was coming next. The whistles. The ladders. The charge. Some were praying, soft, shaking whispers. Some were silent, staring at their boots. Some pretended to be brave. But Arthur could still see one thing in his mind. The young German boy crawling back toward his trench. Just as the barrage began. He tried to push the thought away. He failed. Fix bayonets. The sergeant stomped down the fire step. You heard me. Bayonets, on. Cold steel clicked onto warm barrels. Arthur's hands felt numb as he attached his own. His sleeve trembled. Bird looked over, eyes tight. You good? Arthur only shook his head. Nash spoke quietly. None of us are. Just stay alive. That's all we can do. A thunderous barrage rolled over the German lines, turning the world beyond the parapet into a boiling orange storm. Dirt. Shrapnel. Smoke. It rose in waves, like the earth was breathing fire. Stand ready. The whistles weren't blown yet, but every man lifted his foot to the fire step. Arthur climbed up beside Bird, Hodge, Mullen, and Nash. They lined up like they drilled 100 times. But nothing in training could prepare them for this. The ground shook again. One shell landed so close the entire trench lurched sideways. Mud splattered across Arthur's face. Hodge cursed under his breath. Mullen traced a cross over his chest. Bird muttered, I hate this part. Nash gripped the rim of the trench. Just breathe, lads. Arthur struggled to breathe at all. The last words before the whistle. The lieutenant paced down the line, boots thudding softly. He was young. Younger than Nash. Barely older than Arthur. But his eyes looked ancient. He stopped in front of Arthur's section. Men, listen. The whole line tilted forward, not because of obedience, but because of fear. You've seen the wire. You've seen the barrage. Our job now is simple, get across before the Germans regroup. He swallowed. If you fall behind, there's no turning back. Keep moving forward. No matter what. Arthur closed his eyes. The truth hit him like a hammer. He was minutes away from running toward the very trench where the boy he saved was now fighting for his life. He whispered under his breath. I hope you made it out. The whistle. Time slowed. Silence spread like fog. Then. TWEET. The trench exploded into motion. Men roared. Boots kicked mud. Ladders slammed down. Rifles scrambled upward. Nash bellowed. Go. Go. Move. Arthur's heart punched his ribs as he climbed up the ladder and into hell. No man's land, dawn. Smoke rolled like a low tide over the shattered earth. The barrage still hammered the German line ahead, but already machine guns were waking up. Coughing bullets blindly through the haze. Arthur ran. His legs felt detached from his body. His boots sank deep into mud. His breath came in gasps. Bird shouted next to him. Keep low. Hodge tripped, but Nash caught his collar and shoved him forward. Shell holes yawned wide like giant, dark mouths. Bodies, old and new, lay scattered like broken dolls. Arthur leaped over a crater rim and stumbled down the other side. Bullets snapped overhead. One kicked dirt into his face. Another tore through the sleeve of his coat. He didn't stop. He couldn't. The German line appears. The barrage lifted, suddenly, violently. Boom, 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 silence. And in that silence, the German machine guns opened fully. The air turned to metal. Men dropped in rows. Shouts turned to screams. Arthur threw himself behind a chunk of shattered timber. Bird slid in beside him. The cuts! Find the cuts! Arthur's eyes widened. The gap. The opening they had made last night. He scanned the wire. Most sections were untouched. Twisted, deadly nests waiting to swallow men whole. But there, to the left, a dark, narrow gap. There, Arthur yelled. Nash, Hodge, and Mullen veered toward it. Arthur sprinted out from cover. More bullets shrieked past. He felt the heat of one graze his cheek. He dove into the gap. Inside the German trench. They dropped into the trench like stones into water. Arthur hit the duckboards hard and rolled. Bird landed beside him. Nash and the others scrambled in right after. German soldiers were already there. Some dazed from the bombardment. Some firing wildly. Some still climbing out of dugouts. A young German lunged at Arthur with a bayonet. Arthur parried. Steel clashed. Mud sprayed. The German stumbled back. Injured, terrified. And for a horrifying second, Arthur thought. No man's land, dawn. Smoke rolled like a low tide over the shattered earth. The barrage still hammered the German line ahead, but already machine guns were waking up. Coughing bullets blindly through the haze. Arthur ran. His legs felt detached from his body. His boots sank deep into mud. His breath came in gasps. Bird shouted next to him. Keep low. Hodge tripped, but Nash caught his collar and shoved him forward. Shell holes yawned wide like giant, dark mouths. Bodies, old and new, lay scattered like broken dolls. Arthur leaped over a crater rim and stumbled down the other side. Bullets snapped overhead. One kicked dirt into his face. Another tore through the sleeve of his coat. He didn't stop. He couldn't. The German line appears. The barrage lifted, suddenly, violently. Boom, 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 silence. And in that silence, the German machine guns opened fully. The air turned to metal. Men dropped in rows. Shouts turned to screams. Arthur threw himself behind a chunk of shattered timber. Bird slid in beside him. The cuts! Find the cuts! Arthur's eyes widened. The gap. The opening they had made last night. He scanned the wire. Most sections were untouched. Twisted, deadly nests waiting to swallow men whole. But there, to the left, a dark, narrow gap. There, Arthur yelled. Nash, Hodge, and Mullen veered toward it. Arthur sprinted out from cover. More bullets shrieked past. He felt the heat of one graze his cheek. He dove into the gap. Inside the German trench. They dropped into the trench like stones into water. Arthur hit the duckboards hard and rolled. Bird landed beside him. Nash and the others scrambled in right after. German soldiers were already there. Some dazed from the bombardment. Some firing wildly. Some still climbing out of dugouts. A young German lunged at Arthur with a bayonet. Arthur parried. Steel clashed. Mud sprayed. The German stumbled back. Injured, terrified. And for a horrifying second, Arthur thought. Is that the boy? But no. Different face. Different age. Arthur hesitated. Just for a second. Bird shoved the German aside and knocked him unconscious with a blow to the helmet. Wake up, Art. We're in the thick of it. Arthur nodded, breath shaking. Gunfire echoed through the trench. Grenades detonated. Smoke stung his eyes. Move forward. Nash roared. They pushed deeper into the trench, step by brutal step. And then Arthur saw him. Half buried in debris. Covered in dust and blood. Propped weakly against the trench wall. The German boy from the wire. Alive. But barely. His eyes fluttered open as Arthur approached. Recognition flickered. Do you? Arthur froze. Bird looked between them. Art, who is he? Arthur swallowed hard. A kid. I saw him last night. The boy whispered something, too soft to hear. Arthur knelt down, leaning closer. Speak up, I can't hear. The boy lifted a shaking hand and pointed deeper into the trench. Arthur frowned. What? What is it? The boy managed one final, broken word. Minen? Mines. Arthur's blood turned to ice. Nash shouted from up ahead. Art! Get up here, now! Arthur spun around. Nash and Mullen were standing at the next junction of the trench. Exactly where the boy was pointing. Arthur's eyes widened. Nash'll stop! But he was too late. Mullen took one more step. A soft click beneath his boot. Arthur screamed. Mines! The world exploded. The artillery finally slowed, fading to a distant rumble. Smoke drifted in long, ragged curtains across the shattered hillside, where the survivors lay scattered like broken silhouettes against the burning sky. Captain Roland didn't know how long he'd been unconscious, minutes, hours, maybe a lifetime. All he knew was the taste of dust, the weight of earth on his back, and the faint crackle of fires devouring the village below. He tried to push himself upright, but pain lanced through his ribs like hot wire. He groaned. Somewhere nearby, someone heard him. Captain! Captain Roland, sir, you're alive. It was Private Ash, limping toward him through the haze, half his uniform torn, face streaked with soot. Behind him were only 3 others, the last scraps of the 7th Infantry Platoon. Report, Roland whispered. Ash swallowed hard. Everyone else didn't make it, sir. Lieutenant Hale, Corporal Vint, Medford, all gone. The blast took them. Roland felt the words like stones dropping into a well. He forced himself up anyway. Help me move, he said. Ash obeyed, slipping under his arm. Together the survivors climbed the ridge above the burning village, the same ridge Roland had scouted that morning when the world still felt whole. The village was gone now. Nothing left but collapsing timbers, burning roof beams, and long trails of dust where families had once walked. But the air was not silent. The cries of wounded soldiers, French and German, drifted upward like ghosts refusing to let go. One of the men behind Roland whispered. Was this worth anything, sir? Roland didn't answer. He wasn't sure he could. But then, through the swirling smoke, he saw movement. A child, a small girl, was crawling out from under the charred remains of a stone wall. Her face was grey with ash, her eyes dark with shock. She looked no older than 7. Ash inhaled sharply. We gotta help her. Roland nodded once. Go. They slid down the hillside, stumbling, coughing, shields up against the heat. The girl tried to flee, but her leg buckled and she fell. Ash scooped her up gently. Hey, you're all right, little one. We've got you. Behind her, another figure emerged, an elderly man, gripping a broken cane. His voice trembled in French, please, take her. I cannot walk. Roland knelt beside him. We'll get you both out. But she still has a life ahead. He touched Roland's sleeve. Merci. Roland wanted to argue, to fight the inevitability, but another shell crackled somewhere in the distance. Time was gone. He placed a hand on the man's shoulder. I'll get her to safety. I promise. The old man let out a breath, not of fear but of acceptance. His eyes drifted toward the burning rooftops, as if he were saying goodbye. Roland stood, lifting the girl into his arms. Men, he said quietly. We move east. The main French line should still be holding there. We'll make for the river crossing. Ash looked at him. With what strength, sir? Roland shifted the girl against his chest. With whatever we've got left. They marched, limping, weaving through smoldering ruins, the world turning red and black around them. Every step felt like pushing through a nightmare made of mud and memory. At the edge of the village, Roland paused. One last look. The sky burned red, the same red he had grown used to during the long months of war, the color of dawn, of artillery bursts, of blood on bandages. But today, it felt different. Today, it felt like a warning. A reminder. A promise. As he carried the child toward the faint hope of safety, Roland whispered, maybe to her, maybe to himself. This war won't take everything. Not today. Behind him, the fires crackled. Ahead of him, the world was still uncertain. But somewhere within the smoke and sorrow, the smallest ember of humanity, the act of saving even one life, glowed stubbornly, refusing to go out. The survivors kept moving until the red sky faded into the first pale light of morning. And that was how the story ended. Not with victory, not with glory, but with a handful of men refusing to let the world turn completely dark.